I'm your host, Epix. This is episode 7 of the VR show. Exciting episode tonight, guys. Some interesting VR games and experiences that we're going to take a look at. Of course, we're going to start things off with the VR Roundup, where we quickly go through the VR current events that have been happening this week across all virtual reality platforms. Then we're going to slow things down, guys, for the VR chat. There's a couple of topics I want to talk about. The first, John Riccitiello, the CEO of Unity's shocking statements about VR, well, shocking to some anyways, and an issue that's been plaguing marketing efforts on the Oculus Rift pretty much since launch. Just a huge issue that to date has pretty much fallen on deaf ears. We're going to cover all of that, guys, and more. And I just want to remind you, if you like this video, what really helps me get this video out is hitting the like button, or of course the dislike if you don't like the video, and throwing a comment down below. All of that helps with showing engagement and getting the video out to more people. Guys, it's much appreciated. With that said, grab a snack or bevy of choice, sit back, chillax, and join me on the VR flip side. Following a meetup in Berlin with backers of its Kickstarter Pimax 5K and 8K, Pimax announcing that they're going to begin shipping to backers by the end of this month. They also announced a new 5K Plus model. Backers of the original 5K will automatically be upgraded to this new 5K Plus model. That means that the non-disclosure agreement will also be lifted on the Pimax shortly, and hopefully we're going to start hearing some feedback. Those who've been testing the devices over the last couple of months, I know Survivor, for example, he's been testing it pretty hardcore for the last 2-3 months. Really can't wait to hear that feedback. Gravity Sketch VR, the app that has focused more on design than art, is getting a pretty significant update. A 1.5 update, available now on the Oculus Store and Steam, brings with it a bunch of improved functionality, tools, etc. For example, Tapper Mode, a setting that's going to allow artists to draw any length of stroke and always have tapered ends. They're going to be able to draw normals and edit normals, as well as depth of field plus square snapshot abilities. A bunch of new export options and sketch materials. Those just some of the updates in the 1.5 update patch. First up, everything we know about the Santa Cruz. Well, it was first announced back at Oculus Connect 3. We know it's very likely to use the higher-end Snapdragon 845 as its chip of choice. Now, I stated last time that this device, clearly not an upgrade for the Gear VR slot. They are intending this to be more of a high-end market experience. Currently, speculation as a result of that is that it's going to be priced higher than the Oculus Rift Touch $400 US bundle combo, and likely will come in at over $500 US. No company purposely sets out to be a BlackBerry. Some forget what made them successful, some rest on their laurels, and still others simply spread themselves too thin. And I'm not saying that I think this is happening, but a trend appears to be continuing for HTC with regards to shrinking market share. HTC Vive is now sitting at 42.58% versus the Rift at 47.11%. Windows Mixed Reality moving in at just under 8% with a 7.18. Remember, these stats don't show the true, accurate picture, but they do a decent job of highlighting trends, which in this case is a rise in general for Rift and a decline for Vive overall market share-wise, and the small emergence of Windows Mixed Reality. But again, I wouldn't pay too much heed to this. We know there's going to be market correction. We know products are going to come and go, and I in no way think this means the end of HTC or the Vive. They've simply got to do some correction of their own moving forward. And we got to also remember they've been fairly open with things architecture-wise. In other words, they've opened the front door and are welcoming the other products via Steam VR. So pretty natural expectation that it's going to get crowded. Next up, Sony at it again with a new release bundle for PlayStation VR. First up, the $349 US bundle that includes the HMD, camera, 2 Move controllers, a physical copy of a game that I talked about the other week, Creed Rise to Glory, as well as a digital copy of the game Superhot, which if you haven't played it yet, guys, is a fantastic title. This bundle available the same day that Creed launches, which is the 25th of September. The second bundle is cheaper at $299 US because there's no Move controllers included. You do get a physical copy of the upcoming title Astrobot Rescue Mission, as well as a digital copy of the game Moss. That bundle to launch October 2nd. For a lot of us who were around pre-MP3 era, this was mobile tape low end. And this was mobile tape high end. Having lived through that time, guys, it's hard to look at entertainment subscription services and not think Columbia House. Columbia House were the masters of something called negative option billing, something that the modern forms of these services are not doing. Take Viveport as an example. HTC has launched Viveport subs for Oculus Rift. So mentioned earlier how they seem to be fairly open in terms of welcoming other platforms. Well, now extending the same that they did with Steam VR via their Viveport service. It initially launched as a subservice for the Vive that balanced a higher amount of experiences against just a sample of games. The cost, $9 per month, allows for up to 5 titles selected that you can install. There's now a total of 1,200 titles overall, roughly 500 falling under the subscription 5 per month designation. And on the gaming and experience front, whether shambling around erect or semi-erect, their main goal is one born out of a perverse and burning desire. Yep, zombies. Wave-based shooter developed by Korean studio Vril AR just launched Dead Ground Arena across Steam, Oculus Home, and the Viveport platforms. The game consists of 7 levels in which you can use dual-wield guns to fend off what else? Hordes of zombies. The devs have even announced a future sequel. Dead Ground Arena currently discounted to $10.49 US. That's up until the 10th, so just a day or two away. Again, for Rift, Vive, and Windows VR. After this, it goes up to its regular price of $14.99 US. Then, Windlands 2, a sequel to the first title, to be released on the 12th of September as an exclusive for the Oculus Rift. 2 years in, I would have hoped the exclusives were no longer as much of a thing, and the recent trends have seemingly been to release on more than one platform, but here is an exception. The game, as with its prequel, light on textures and bright on shaded poly. So I expected the performance to be very smooth and fast as a result. However, feedback coming back from those who've tried the game say the opposite, that there are some performance issues, which hopefully the devs will resolve soon. It's going to have the same grappling hook mechanic and imposing level bosses, as well as a 4-player co-op. The title Firewall Zero, the multiplayer shooter that launched last week on PlayStation VR, is sitting at the top of the UK game sales charts. That's in their top 10. The game appears to be a lot of fun, and those whom I've spoken to who've played it all seem to agree on this point. For example, PlayStation VR Frank. However, that isn't to say it's not without its exploits or issues. In fact, he touched on that in a recent video. A statement from the devs indicating they are aware and working to resolve. Tiny Bull Studios and fellow travelers have announced a new title called Blind, which is a psychological thriller. It's going to launch on the 18th of this month for all platforms, PlayStation VR, Rift, Vive, even OS VR. You play the part of a young woman who's awoken in a room with no vision. The game has about 5 to 8 hours of gameplay, depending on how fast you churn through the content, and will retail for $25 on the PlayStation Network, Oculus Store, as well as the Steam Store. You progress through the game with your white cane tapping the ground ahead of you, which provides short burst reveals of terrain and surroundings close to you. We've seen that mechanic via an echolocation and some other titles, but definitely a fun game mechanic. I am an absolute sucker for adult animation, whether it's one of my favorites, Aqua Teen Hunger Force.
Black gold! Texas tea!
Is it supposed to stink like this?
Yeah, that's why they call it prude, Carl.
No, it's not. We hit my septic tank, you jackass.
Or Archer.
I have to go, but if I find one single dog hair when I get back, I'll rub sand in your dead little eyes.
Very good, sir.
I also need you to go buy sand.
Yes, sir.
I don't know if they grade it, but... coarse.
Well, VR has also had its share of this via Rick and Morty, and of course Squanch Studios, the folks behind Smith & Smitherson's Accounting, Dr. Splorchy Space Heroes. Now they are releasing Trover Saves the Universe. The game releases in 2019 exclusively for the PlayStation VR, but promises a lot of the same type of adult humor. I want to talk first about John Riccitiello's recent statement about the state of virtual reality. Now, if you're not familiar who he is the CEO of Unity, which is one of the main virtual reality game engines. In fact, it's probably one of the main game engines, period. Right up there, along with Unreal Technologies game engine. I would say anything after that is probably very proprietary. For example, the stuff that Bethesda uses for Skyrim and Fallout. They're pretty much the main two, Unreal and Unity. And just like the Unreal, Unity has also made some very aggressive pushes in favor of virtual reality. They've been very friendly for the technology. So was it a little surprising that Riccitiello stated that he believes VR hasn't had its consumer launch yet? Now it sounds a little bit shocking, but I want to take a look at that statement. I want to analyze it a little bit. So we could look at this a couple of ways. If we look at the initial rollout of VR consumer technology back in 2016, those first early months of the launch, there was absolutely no doubt many of you as early adopters, we were always going to buy. It was a no-brainer for us, was never an issue, was never even up for debate, right? It was the rest of the gamers outside of our circle that were always the question marks. And I talked about it last week. I said, picture a curve. People are going to purchase VR technology at various points along that curve. When the technology gets to their personal sweet spot, definitely has its share of issues, yet we purchased, we supported, we started things off. We've seen others join up. I also talked about the naysayers, the cynics that still have yet to purchase VR technology. And I think that's what Riccitiello is getting at. And if that is what he's getting at, I would agree with that statement kind of in principle, that we have yet to see the product, or maybe it's a game that really creates the mass market acceptance for virtual reality. Personally, my opinion is I think it's a combination of both. We've got fantastic titles. There's no doubt there's some fantastic VR gaming to be had across all of the VR platforms. Do we have that true killer app yet? We've got some that come close. I don't think we have an ultimate system seller yet. Firewatch comes close, Resident Evil 7 came close, and there's some other titles across, the Rift, the Vive as well. And probably most important, comfort-wise, there's still a lot of people, they just don't want something on their freaking head. And it's going to take a while to appeal to them. My theory, my take on this is a couple of additional years of innovation, right? Probably we get to that 4K sweet spot with less technology on our head, where tethered isn't kind of the main option, and there's enough gaming out to really catch people's interest. And probably most important, I said comfort, but really this one probably even usurps comfort, and that would be cost. What is that cost? Well, if we look at consoles, look at the Switch, look at the PlayStation, you could make the argument, or the Xbox One, for example, that it needs to have the console style price. And really, a lot of the bundles do. My take on it, again, my opinion is that's not good enough, because this technology, as cool as it is, it doesn't replace consoles. It doesn't replace computers. It works alongside them. It's a complement technology. It needs to be even lower priced. And that is, for a lot of people, a hard pill to swallow. How much lower can this get, Epix? Well, it can get a lot lower. It can still get under sub 200. To me, I think that's the sweet spot. So project forward 3-4 years. Where are we sitting? 2022, 2023, with the launch having happened in 2016. We're about 6 years in at that point, not even at the 10-year point, but that's where I think the magic's going to happen. And that's where I think we're going to see technologies fall to the wayside. They can't all keep going. So let me know your thoughts on Riccitiello's statement. Do you agree or do you disagree? Do you think we did have our consumer launch and this is just kind of the state of things? Love to hear from you guys in the comments below. The next thing I want to talk about is something that has plagued the Oculus Rift since day one, since its launch. And that's the output capture of gameplay video. So like a lot of other content creators, most of us use a product like OBS, for example, to capture game footage. We even might use hardware devices. I've got an AverMedia Game Capture 2 that I use for PlayStation VR content. But for Windows stuff, Rift, Vive, I tend to use OBS. What a lot of people aren't aware of, just based on the screenshots, is how radically different the presentation of that in-game VR experience is depending on which output you're capturing. Remember, the Vive and the Rift, for the most part, are fairly close technology-wise. Where they differ most, obviously, is the kind of comfort, the way they go about strapping to your head, and the lenses that they're using. One a hybrid, one more of a pure Fresnel lens. But resolution-wise, field of view, refresh rate, they're pretty much on par. Yet the output is dramatically different. Take a look at this. This is some footage that Nady and Mike from VR Oasis took to kind of highlight the difference between the two captures. So here's some footage that Nady and Mike over from VR Oasis captured, and it really shows the difference. And it's dramatic, guys, but look at the difference. The Vive output essentially captures what you see in-game. Now, obviously it's not doing it in a VR sense, but in a field of view sense with some slight warpage, at least it captures what the person inside sees. Whereas the Rift experience is a lot more limited. It really narrows that field of view and doesn't do a good job of capturing what you actually see. Most people are going to look at this and not pay much attention. For those of us who create the content, though, it's a pretty obvious and glaring difference. And I know myself and others, specifically, again, Mike from VR Oasis, he's pretty much been an echo chamber asking for this to get better, directly contacting those involved at Oculus to see if they can make the differences that are required to provide better output, because it's really all we got at this point, short of the best, which we know is having people try VR. The other option is showing them through captured output, and we need that to be as close to the source as possible. So hopefully this video, all these other videos, and all of us reaching out as content creators will be able to make a difference and have them fix that up, because it's definitely sorely needed. All right, guys, that is it for this episode of the VR show. Depending on when you catch this, there may have been a streaming or may not have been a streaming. Moving forward, I really want to make Saturday kind of a VR hangout where we chat about games, chat about anything virtual reality related across any platform. I'm going to try to make that a regular thing. That'll be alongside the VR show. and whatever releases I do tutorial-wise, i.e. the VR arcade and gaming stuff. And just one last thing that I want to talk about. I've had a few people ask about the VR arcade. It's obviously for myself, but it is also to have clients come in and give them a really custom, higher-end VR experience than they could get from a VR arcade. At least that's the hope, and that's what I'm aiming at. Having the VR cockpit for racers, seated style games, the standing room scale, and seated experience for the other types of experiences and games. Guys, that's it for this episode. Hopefully you guys have are having a fantastic weekend. Have a kick-arse week. As always, cheers, guys.